Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. I just got done listening to this new Neil Young archival release called Crazy Days with Crazy Horse. All these recordings from 1969. It is absolutely fantastic. I think this is one of the best archival Neil Young releases I have ever heard. Just for a brief moment here, some really amazing unreleased studio versions of Wonderin', Come On Baby Let's Go Down, an early version of Winter Long, some alternate takes of Cowgirl in the Sand, which are just fantastic, and Cinnamon Girl, plus other treats. There's a version of Helpless here, got done a year prior to CSN and Y's Deja Vu album. But anyway, we'll get more into this in another video where we talk about new archival releases. But highly recommended, this Neil Young and Crazy Horse, early days, 10 tracks, just a fantastic record. So let's get back to what this video is about. This video, I saw a video by a guy named Scott at the Prog Corner. Loved his video, loved this concept. I'm stealing this idea from him. This video is called 10 Bands with No Bad Albums. 10 bands with no bad albums. Quite a task. Hard to find, but not really. If you really look deep in his particular discographies. So Scott had his 10. There's a few in there that I have as well in my list that Scott had. So here's my particular 10. When this video is over, I want you to pick 10 bands that you feel have no bad albums in their discography. All right? So here's my 10. I'm going to start off here with a guy, in my opinion, who never, ever released a bad album. Even his lesser albums are still good. You can still listen to them all the way through. But there's really no such thing as a bad Bob Marley and the Wailers album. This is his first album for Island Records. He was signed to Island Records by Chris Blackwell. Prior to the Island Records discography, even that early stuff is fantastic. This album, African Herbsman, which was released sometime in the early 70s, of early recordings prior to the Island signing, are all Lee Scratch Perry produced tracks, and these are all fantastic. Even if you go way back, if you have the Bob Marley box set from about 1992, you can hear some early Bob. That's all great as well. So back to the Island Records catalog of Bob Marley, everything from Catch a Fire from 73 to Uprising, his last album in 1980, even including the posthumous Confrontation album, is fantastic. You could start anywhere in the catalog. At the beginning here with Catch a Fire. You could go in the middle with Rastleman Vibration, Exodus, all incredible albums. I wouldn't give any Bob Marley album less than a 4-star rating. There's a good handful of 5-star albums, in my opinion, like Kaya, Rastleman Vibration, Catch a Fire, Natty Dread, but they're all fantastic. Even his live albums are amazing. Babylon by Bus, the live album from 75. You just cannot go wrong with any Bob Marley album in his collection. Which makes Bob Marley stand out from a lot of other reggae artists. There's a lot of different musical influences in with the reggae. There's blues, there's rhythm and blues, there's pop, there's a little bit of rock. So, and there's the Impressions influence there on the Wailers singing as well. So there's a lot of great elements of Bob's music, and especially the songwriting. The songwriting is superb. This music is positive, it's uplifting, it's transcendent. This music will be heard for 100 years or more. It's just completely timeless. So that is my number 1. Number 2, a band that started in 1965. A chance meeting by 2 UCLA students, Ray Manzarek, Jim Morrison. In just 4 years of recording time, they put out 6 albums. And when you think about when Jim Morrison met Ray Manzarek on the beach in Venice, that was 65, 67, 8, 9. In just 6 years, the Doors did all that, played a lot of concerts, recorded 6 albums, a lot of controversy, the Miami incident, the court case. They packed a lot into a short amount of time. And every album, from the first album to the last album, the 6th album, LA Woman. By the way, this is an original LA Woman press here with the original cover. Fantastic stuff. You cannot go wrong with any Doors album if you are influenced by the Doors and can get into the Doors. There's just no such thing as a bad Doors album. There's barely a bad Doors track. I'd say the only bad track or two would be on Soft Parade. That's still a fantastic album. But for me, the Doors, Solid discography, 6 albums of greatness, plus the American Prayer album, which I love as well. Countless compilations. So Doors, number 2 for me. Number 3, band that came in the late 70s, put out 5 stellar albums and said, we're done. We're done. I'm talking about The Police. It's their first album, Outlandish d'Amour. They had Regatta de Blanc following that, Zenyatta Mindata in 1980, Ghost in the Machine in 82, and then, of course, Synchronicity, which I think is one of their best albums. Their most popular album, but really musically just really, really good. From 1983. I don't think The Police ever put out a bad album. They were overplayed, no doubt. And back in the 80s, I did get a little tired of all of the same songs, like Every Breath You Take and Roxanne, but you can't deny the songwriting prowess of Sting and the amazing playing of Stuart Copeland, Andy Summers. Incredible band. So that is another one for me. The Police coming in at number 3. These aren't ranked anyway. I'm just running down numbers, okay? Number 4, a band that, in my opinion, probably has the best discography of the 1970s. Their output from 72 to 1980 is absolutely perfection. Even their post-split albums, their 2 post-split albums are really good. Maybe not on the same par with their original 7 albums from the 1970s. I'm talking about Steely Dan. Their first album, Can't Buy a Thrill, pretty much showed from the start how great this band was, how different they were, incorporating all these jazz elements and pop, blues, incredible stuff. You go down the line, you got Countdown to Ecstasy from 1973, Pretzel Logic from 74, Katie Lied 75, 76, Royal Scam, of course, Asia 77, Gaucho from 80, all sounding different from one another, all progressing, just like the Beatles, progressing from album to album. It's all about quality with Steely Dan, not quantity. So Steely Dan for me is number 4 on my top 10 list here. Their last album, Gaucho, is fantastic. The album that came out, their first post-split album, Two Against Nature, had some fine tracks. I'm not really a big fan of the last album, Everything Must Go, but I can't call it a bad album. It's just very formulaic, kind of like they started getting from Gaucho onward with that kind of very hypnotic click track sounding thing and less loose sounding. But Steely Dan, one of the greatest catalogs in music. And they, for me, are in my top 10 as far as 10 bands with no bad albums. Steely Dan. Another band that put out 13 studio albums. There was 1 reunion album. So initially, the initial output was 12 albums between 65 and around 71. I'm talking about the Byrds. Just an amazing catalog. This is their first album, Mr. Tambourine Man. This is their final album with Clarence White. Farther Along from 1971. Everything in between is fantastic. I think I prefer mostly the Crosby era, but you can't go wrong with the later era. I mean, think about the Crosby era, right? You got Mr. Tambourine Man, Turn, 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 5D, Younger Than Yesterday, Notorious Byrd Brothers, and then you've got the Graham Parsons era with Sweetheart of the Rodeo. And then, of course, those really kind of overlooked albums from the Clarence White era, I think, are fantastic. Dr. Byrds, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Byrd, or whatever it's called, Dr. Byrd and Mr. Hyde, Easy Rider, Untitled. Bird Maniacs isn't real great, but I wouldn't call it a bad album. It's just overproduced. Farther Along has some great tracks on it here. And then you have the reunion album that came out in 73, which wasn't a real Byrds album. It was more kind of showing the singular talents of each member, but still not a bad album, not a bad album. So the Byrds for me are way up there as far as a great discography. And for me, they're at number 4 on the list, or number 5 on the list, the Byrds. Number 6, a band that was only around for 4 years, cranked out nothing but quality. There's barely a bad song in their catalog. They put out 4 studio albums, but they put out 2 compilations. One compilation, I think, is almost, for me, considered an album. And I think a lot of other fans of this band, I'm talking about the Smiths. This is Hatful of Hollow. This came out around the same time as their debut album. I think it's a better representation, more of a raw Smiths than that first debut, even though that debut was fantastic. So you've got the Smiths, you've got Hatful of Hollow, Meat is Murder, Queen is Dead, and then you've got the last album, Strange Ways, Here We Come. All quality stuff here from the Smiths. They too were about quality, not quantity, even though they did a lot in just 4 years of recording time. I think they started in 82, so they were only around for about 5 years only. So yeah, the Smiths have a fantastic catalog, and if you listen to, you know, Half Full of Hollow or Louder Than Bombs, their B-sides are as good as their album cuts, and outtakes as well. So the Smiths are coming from me at number 6 on my list. Another band that was only around really for 2 years. 2 years, from 1967 through 65 through 67, put out, I think, around 10 top 10 singles. But to me, they're more of an albums band too, as well as a singles band. They put out 4 albums between 65 and 67 with their initial leader. And then they put out 2 soundtracks as well. I'm talking about the Lovin Spoonful. This is their first album, Do You Believe in Magic? They also put out an album called Daydream, Hums of the Lovin Spoonful, Everything Playing. They also put out this last album with only the drummer intact, Joe Butler. But this even has some fine tracks on it. It's not a horrible album, but I have to include it because it's part of the discography. But, you know, they have 2 soundtracks, You're a Big Boy Now and What's Up Tiger Lily. So you've got 4 studio albums, 2 soundtracks, and then an extra album by Joe Butler, all in an amount of 3 years. Incredible band. If you've never heard their albums, they are fantastic. I think they're almost flawless when you listen to them. There's maybe only a couple of duds on these 4 albums, but they play through fantastic. And these days, I think I just feel the Lovin Spoonful are very overlooked. I think they should be mentioned in the same breath as the Byrds and Love and a lot of those great LA bands. They're fantastic, even though they weren't from LA. They were from New York. But I'm just saying, they were fantastic, and I think they belong on this list, for me at least. Lovin Spoonful, another band too that was only around for maybe about 5 years, in the late 70s to early 80s. They cranked out 5 albums. Great stuff throughout these 5 albums. They progressed as each album went along. I'm talking about The Jam. This is their first album, In the City. Came out in 1977. From this, you got, this is The Modern World following this. You've got All Mod Cons. And then 2 of my favorite albums, Setting Suns and Sound Effects followed. And then the last album here, The Gift, from 82, where they were incorporating more rhythm and blues, soul elements like on Town Called Malice. But I think my favorites would be probably more the middle period, Setting Suns and Sound Effects. But yeah, all 5 Jam albums, or six Jam albums, should I say, are fantastic. And if you never heard the Jam, I'd pick them up. They're all well worth getting. So I don't think there's a stinker in the bunch. They're all fantastic. The Jam, another group too as well. They were only around for a short period, maybe from 69 to 73 roughly. The lead singer was moonlighting with this band. He had his own solo career going. He was doing a lot, but they cranked out a lot in those 4 years. I'm talking about the Faces. This is their 3rd album. A Nod is as Good as a Wink to a Blind Horse, which has the hit Stay With Me. Their first album, First Step, from 69. Long Player from 71. You've got the last album, Ooh La La. And then I'm counting this as an album too. This is a great live album called Coast to Coast, Overture and Beginners. Rod Stewart and the Faces. Has some just fantastic performances all over it. And I think the Faces are really, really, really one of the great rock and roll bands of the 70s. And I think their catalog stands strong. And if you've never heard the Faces, I'd pick up all 4 albums. They're fantastic. And then a band that pretty much defines a perfect catalog. Even my least listened album of this band, I would still say is a great album. They never put out barely a bad song. They progressed, they revolutionized music. Of course, I'm talking about the Beatles. You know, 13 albums of absolutely just revolutionary, just melodic greatness. Just, you know, what else can you say about the Beatles, which hasn't been said all these years, right? Please Please Me is a great debut. Every album after this, they progressed. It's absolutely amazing when you think about it, how different Help sounds from Hard Day's Night, how Rubber Soul sounds different than Help, and then Revolver, and then Sgt. Pepper. It's mind-blowing what the Beatles did in 7 short years of recording. Think about this, 1963 right here, 6 years later, you got Abbey Road. Absolutely mind-blowing. I don't think there will ever be a discography as mind-blowing as the Beatles, just because they did it in such a short time, and the quality is so unsurpassed, you know what I mean? So again, mind-blowing, 7 years, 13 albums, plus all the concerts, you know, in the early years. It's amazing that they lasted as long as they did, and it's no surprising that they did split up when they did. I mean, they had to get out. They were pretty much living in each other's pants at one point, you know, for 6 years, 7 years. Plus, you know, before they got signed to Parlophone, you know, they were playing the Cavern for years. And so, yeah, it's amazing what they did. It will always be mind-blowing to the end of time. The Beatles, definitely, for me, have the best catalog of all time. A flawless collection. And there you go. Those are my 10 that I picked. 10 bands with no bad albums. List yours in the comments section. If you dig the content, just please press subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.